Good morning, everyone. I just want to share a thought for this Saturday morning. Before I share it, I just wanted to mention just something about these short messages that I post and that I give you each week. These are hopefully meant to provoke you and to encourage you to look into the particular areas that I'm bringing for further study. Not the full message. There is so much that you can say about these particular areas, but this is just something to encourage you to dig a bit deeper and to do a bit of further study. As much as I could talk forever, you don't have the time to listen as long as I could speak, and so these messages I want to and prayerfully just encourage you just to go a bit further studying for your own life. I've been thinking this week about risk assessments. Do you know, in this time of lockdown and as workplaces, schools, churches are strategizing, planning to get back into the buildings that they normally use, there is a requirement that we have to do. It's called a risk assessment, where we identify the hazards to people's lives. They identify the risks in the buildings that could bring harm, that could, even worst case scenario, cause death. And so we have to identify these risks. Many years ago, the churches did a risk assessment of asbestos, where they looked and surveyed every building, certainly Elim did, and risk assessed asbestos in buildings and removed any asbestos that was in the buildings. And so risk assessments are important because they keep people safe. And it got me thinking about life risk assessments. Do you know, in our own life, I wonder, do we ever think about doing a risk assessment? Do you know, even just looking at our bodies, the food that we eat, the things that we put into our bodies, do we ever risk assess? Do we ever wonder about the harm that some of these things that we put into our body will do? And so just in that, we do risk assessments. The toxins that we ingest into our bodies, and so it's something I believe we don't do a lot of, and maybe we should do more of, and actually thinking about the consequences of what these things can do long term to our bodies. Most times we just jump straight in, don't we? And we don't think about the consequences. But let's do a risk assessment there. Also, spiritually, do we do spiritual risk assessments over our own life? Do you know, there is things in our life, things in life that can harm us spiritually. Do you know, sins, identifying, risk assessing sins that we are susceptible to, and identifying them. Do you know, anger is one of them, making judgments, complaining, different things. There is so many, and I wonder, do we risk assess the things that do cause anger or stir up anger in us, the things that do cause us to complain and murmur, making judgments, and so identifying these and just removing them, or removing the things that cause these things. Do you know, also temptations, identifying the temptations that we are susceptible to. Do you know, in my life there is things that I will never be tempted by. Probably as I shop with Annette and she drags me into a jewellery store Do you know, the sparkle in that jewellery store has no temptation whatsoever. I have no intention of ever buying for myself a piece of jewellery. But you know, put me in a stationery shop and you will see me come alive. You will see me open my wallet and spend. And so that's just a funny, simple illustration. But you know, there is things that we are tempted with, and we have to identify the risks and the harm that it could bring us spiritually and remove them. Do you know, are we susceptible to anxiety, fear? Are we susceptible to worry? And so it's identifying these risks, the things that bring this into our life, and dealing with them through the Word of God, through prayer, through trusting God. And so I really believe that we need to do a risk assessment. Yes, physically on our buildings and places to keep people safe, on our lives, our physical bodies, doing a risk assessment. Will things harm us long term, or will things cause us to be healthy? And spiritually, what are the things that we are susceptible, the risks? Do you know, Hebrews chapter 12 verse 1 says this: "Therefore, since we are surrounded by such a huge crowd of witnesses to the life of faith, let us strip off every weight that slows us down, especially the sin that so easily trips us up, and let us run with endurance the race God has set before us. We do this by keeping our eyes fixed on Jesus, who initiates and perfects our faith." And so, let us keep our eyes fixed on Jesus. Let us keep running our race. Let us throw off everything that weighs heavily upon us, and let us identify the sins that easily trip us up. And so today, let's do a risk assessment on our lives. Be blessed today, and remember that you are blessed to be a blessing.